There is a profound difference between changing behavior and changing identity. Behavior requires maintenance. Identity requires nothing. Most people spend their lives trying to improve behavior, thinking differently, acting differently, reacting differently, without ever noticing the quiet force that determines whether any of it lasts. Identity. Identity is the lens through which all experience is filtered. You do not get what you want consistently. You get what matches who you believe yourself to be. This is why effort exhausts people. Effort tries to override identity, and identity always wins. Neville Goddard understood this deeply. That is why he did not teach effort. He taught assumption. Assumption is not pretending, it is occupying. Occupying a state until it becomes natural. And when a state becomes natural, it becomes invisible. You stop thinking about it, you stop managing it, you stop defending it. It simply is. That is when identity locks in. Helene Hadsell did not win thousands of contests because she was disciplined. She won because winning was no longer an event. It was an expression of who she was being. She did not say, "I am trying to win." She lived as someone for whom winning was normal, and life agreed. This is the part most people never reach. They change actions but keep identity untouched. They visualize abundance while still identifying as someone who waits. They affirm confidence while still identifying as someone who needs proof. They imagine success while still identifying as someone who is becoming, not someone who is. And becoming is endless. Being is final. Now pause here for a moment. Not to analyze, to recognize. Where have you been improving behavior instead of setting identity? That question alone creates a crack, and cracks are where transformation enters. Identity does not change dramatically, it changes quietly. Usually without announcement, without ceremony. It changes when you stop negotiating with yourself, when the inner debate ends. Helene did not negotiate. Neville did not negotiate. They decided. And decision, when not revisited, becomes identity. This is why the law of assumption works effortlessly after a certain point and feels impossible before it. Before identity shifts, assumption feels like pretending. After identity shifts, assumption feels like remembering. That is the difference. And this brings us to an essential truth. Reality does not test identity. It reflects it. The world does not ask, "Are you sure?" It says, "Show me." And it shows you, every day, who you believe yourself to be. Now here is the subtle danger. When people begin to see results, they often relax into relief, but never fully set the identity. They enjoy the evidence without becoming the source. And when identity remains undefined, results fluctuate. This is why some manifestations come and go. The event happened, but the state was never stabilized. Helene stabilized the state. She did not celebrate outcomes as surprises. She received them as confirmations. And confirmation strengthens identity. Now let me speak directly to you. If you are still listening, it means something in you already recognizes this. Because the mind cannot stay engaged this long without resonance. Something here feels familiar. That familiarity is not learning, it is remembering. And remembering changes posture, which leads us into the next layer. Because once identity is set, something extraordinary happens. You stop managing reality, and reality starts managing itself. At this point, let this be marked quietly. In the comments, write a short phrase, no explanation, no story. I know who I am. not for engagement, for alignment. Because once identity is named, it becomes harder to abandon. Confusion is not harmless. Confusion is a state, and reality responds to it precisely. When identity is unclear, life sends mixed signals, delays, contradictions, half results, not as punishment, as feedback. The world mirrors internal clarity. This is why people feel life resists them. It is not resisting, it is reflecting hesitation. Helene's power was not confidence, it was clarity. She was not emotionally intense, she was emotionally settled. She did not wonder if she deserved to win, she assumed she did. An assumption does not argue. Neville called this the art of assumption. Art, not effort. Art implies ease. When identity is clear, choices simplify, reactions soften, urgency disappears. And when urgency disappears, speed increases. This is the paradox most never understand. The calmer you become internally, the faster life moves externally. Because urgency is friction, clarity is flow. This is why, after identity locks in, manifestation feels almost boring. Not dramatic, not magical, normal. And normal things happen easily. At this stage, people often fear complacency. They think, if I stop pushing, things will stop. The opposite is true. Pushing is needed only when identity is uncertain. Once identity is set, pushing becomes interference. Neville warned about this subtly when he spoke of Sabbath. Sabbath is not rest from work. It is rest from identity conflict. It is the end of inner disagreement. And where there is no disagreement, there is no resistance. Life flows. Helene lived in Sabbath, not one day a week, as a lifestyle. She selected, she assumed, she rested, and the world complied. This is why her results seemed outrageous to others. They were not outrageous. They were consistent. Now notice something gently. When you feel the urge to do more, what identity are you standing in? Someone who has, or someone who hopes? Hope is a beautiful emotion, but it is not creative. Creation begins when hope is no longer needed, which brings us to the midpoint of this journey. Because at this stage, many people feel called to stabilize this identity instead of visiting it occasionally. If that is you, there is a 21-day challenge linked in the description and pinned comment below. Not to teach you more, but to help identity settle through consistency. You do not need it. But some choose structure to support embodiment. Now return with me, because the final movement of this video is where everything converges. Once identity is set, something subtle changes in how others respond to you. You do not announce it. You do not explain it. Yet doors open differently. Conversations shift. Opportunities appear without struggle. This is not charisma. It is coherence. People respond to coherence instinctively. They trust it. They follow it. They align with it. Because coherence feels safe. Uncertainty leaks. Confidence radiates. And confidence is not loud, it is calm. This is why people often say, something about you feels different. They cannot name it. They are responding to state. Neville said, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in it. Persistence here does not mean effort. It means not leaving, not returning to doubt, not reopening debate. Helene persisted effortlessly because she did not argue with herself. Most people exhaust themselves by repeatedly deciding and undeciding. Identity cannot stabilize in a revolving door. At some point, the door must close, and when it does, life reorganizes rapidly. This is why, after a true identity shift, Results often come in clusters. Not one thing, many. Because identity generates patterns. You do not manifest one event. You manifest a style of life, and styles persist. Now ask yourself this, quietly. What kind of life does my identity generate? Not what you want, what it generates. The answer is already visible, and it is changeable, but only through identity, not effort. This is the final realization Neville wanted students to reach. Not, how do I manifest this, but who must I be for this to be normal? Normal is destiny, and destiny obeys identity. At the end of this journey, there is nothing left to do. No practice to master, no ritual to repeat. Only one question remains. Will you live from identity or return to effort? Effort is familiar, identity is simple. Effort keeps the mind busy, identity keeps the mind free. The world does not need you to try harder, it needs you to be clearer, and clarity, once chosen, requires no defense. If you feel calmer now than when you began listening, that is not coincidence. That calm is alignment, and alignment is power. This channel exists not to motivate you, but to remind you of who you already are. If you choose to remain aligned with this frequency, you may subscribe, not as an action, but as a continuation. Because once identity is set, life no longer negotiates. It responds, quietly, faithfully, inevitably. And that is the true power you were meant to remember.